being introduced to what a project was or what project management is. And I was just blown away. I was just like, how have I never known about this before? Like, this is so cool. So I just got to provide support in regards to the PA part, but also started to do little bits of project admin. And within probably about 6 to 8 weeks, I got promoted and actually put on to be basically like a project support officer. But also, as well as providing support to project managers, it was also providing support from a PMO perspective. So there wasn't like a PMO set up at the time. And my role, even though I was really new to it, was actually to provide that assurance to the boards, to the committees, and we had like what they called an electronic PMO. So we were using something called Allocate software, which is a really good software, which had sort of a project management software tool on there, which was what we were using to monitor and track the projects. And one of my roles was to sort of come up with, like, how do we track the projects, you know, what sort of reports to use. Basically, you know, there wasn't a PMO in place at the time, and even though I was kind of, you know, at the lower end of the scale at that point, I was being asked questions like, well, how do I write a business case? What needs to be put in a business case? And it was like, if I'm supposed to be monitoring and assuring on these projects and programs, I need to know project management, risk management, program management. I needed to know it all inside out. So I literally spent hours in the evenings, on the weekends, just binging videos, books, anything I could get my hands on to really get to the grips of the language and sort of learning it. And it just grew from there. And then obviously from a PMO sort of perspective as well. So I sat the various courses throughout the years, you know, so I've done Prince 2, MSP, P3O, Management of Risk, PMP, you name them, Green Belt, Lean Sigma, Scrum, all sorts of different variations. And I then stepped into the role because at that time we were actually starting to learn a lot, really, where the knowledge base really sort of jumped off the scale. Just about to go onto a busy road, so I'm just going to pause it here and I'll come back. Okay, so just moving away from that busy road there because the traffic gets really loud. So yeah, I was working within the NHS, I forgot to sort of say that at that point, on the commissioning side. And the organisation I was working for at that time was a combination of several clinical commissioning groups, which then went into special measures. And as I went into special measures, basically the CEO at the time and members of the board they basically all had to go, and a bunch of NHS England turnaround directors came in. My manager at the time had a background, clinical background as well, so they were pulled out to go onto the front line to work because they were short, which meant I then needed to step into the assurance manager position. And working really closely with these turnaround directors, with these consultancies that had come in, and the level of reporting and scrutiny on the projects and programs was just absolutely next level. Weekly, daily sit reps on it, and really making sure that there was clear governance restructuring in place. So I learned an awful lot from that time. So then moving on to that, from there, this is still on the sort of commissioner side, I moved and ended up working with several clinical commissioning groups, and this time within a PMO lead, so leading from a PMO perspective, and also planning, because the business planning went hand in hand in that, and that was fantastic. So that was, again, sort of the whole monitoring, making sure that there was clear frameworks in place, pulling the reports together, helping provide assurance in regards to delivery, all that sort of good stuff. And when we finished with that, so I did that for a little while, and I really, really enjoyed that. I then moved on into, so really got into risk management. And I absolutely love risk management, and an opportunity came up to actually work in a different sector. So I'd done quite a few years there from the NHS perspective, but then I went into work from the defence sector, which is completely different kettle of fish. The level of governance, the level of scrutiny, the bureaucracy that comes with that is, you know, completely different, completely next level. And yeah, I'll talk to you in a second. It's just got to another busy road. So yeah, where did I get to? I was just talking about risk management. So yeah, that was a really different sort of bureaucratic levels to that next sort of level, and that was really, really interesting. So that was working on a really, really large tender, massive value, which was looking at modernisation of particular services within the defence sector, and my part of that was very much you know, getting the framework in place, having a really clear sort of register in place for that tender and bid to sort of go in. So that was fantastic. I really enjoyed that. And then from an operational perspective, that is when I then went back to the NHS, and I was working for a very, very large trust where I was managing a very, very large admin team, but 8 surgical specialties. So my role was pretty much managing the day-to-day operations of the 8 surgical specialties. That was everything to do with like the projects that were running. So there's elements of project management, budget management, business planning, capacity management. You know, as I said, leading a really large team, also working alongside consultants and helping with their PA planning, also looking at theatre capacity. So making sure that each service had the right allocated number of theatre slots that they needed, but also managing that journey from a patient perspective, you know, from the moment that they have their first appointment, outpatient appointment, to screening, all the way through to having a surgery and the follow-up appointment. So it covered the whole sort of journey, and I absolutely loved it. It was really good. And one of the other parts of it as well was managing 2 surgical sites. So I had to do a lot of like they call them PTLs. So it's you knew basically the patients that were on your waiting list, and there was a lot of targets that needed to be hit, and lots of KPIs, lots of success measures. So it was a case of basically saying that why has that person not had their surgery within these amount of days? So you would be sort of, you know, held accountable. You'd have to go to regular sort of performance meetings on that. So there was a lot of measurements too. But then there was the patient flow element. So on a regular basis, as one of those, as the operational manager, you had to work with the ops team, and you had to be put on either bronze or silver command that day. So basically what that meant was working with patient flow, working with all the wards, working with the ED. So across the outpatients and surgical site, needing to know who was waiting in the ambulance, what they're waiting for, who was coming through the front door in regards to the A&E, knowing how long they've been waiting, was there any trolley breaches, if they need emergency surgery, is there a slot available, is there a bed available, how's that going to impact in regards to the elective surgeries that we've got going on, does anything need to step down, if there's no beds, which was quite often no bed base, so then the flow's not going through from ED into the wards, how exactly are we going to get those in? So it's not only knowing what was coming through ED, what was in the ambulances, it was also what's coming through the back door. so like GP referrals into ambulatory units. So they would be put up on, they wouldn't be put on a system, they'd just be written up on a whiteboard. And then you'd have regular meetings throughout the day. You know, the bed base is this, you know, medicine needs beds. Is there any beds that surgery can give up? You know, we need some ICU beds, who can be stepped down? Need high care beds, who can step down that perhaps wasn't going to be stepped down for a few more days. So it was really, really interesting. I loved it. And it was throughout the height of the pandemic as well, so there was all sorts of stuff going on. And then that all came crashing down and basically led me on the path, in a way, to what I do now. Because after work one day, my eldest son went missing, and we're looking for him, and got to a point of being so worried that I reported to the police, and then had 2 detectives at the door, and he'd sadly taken his own life. And that was the pivot of not being able to work basically in a traditional setting anymore and transitioning to working remotely. So as you probably can see, it's a little bit later in the day now, and I just needed to stop earlier on because I was getting upset, which I'm sure you can understand. But yeah, as I was saying, my world just came crashing down, and my eldest son, he went missing, and we were looking for him for hours, and then we reported him missing to the police. And as I was on hold, after putting in the missing persons report, I was then phoned by an unknown number, which automatically made me think it was my son. But it was actually another police department who were telling me that there were 2 detectives waiting outside our house for us. And I just knew something was wrong, you know, just something serious, you could just feel it. And I'm not going to go into all the details or anything, but they were there to basically tell us that a few hours ago that our eldest son had taken his own life. Grief is awful. It doesn't go away. There is no time limit to how long you feel that, and that is okay. Right, just go for my thoughts. Anyway, it took me 4 months to be able to leave my house on my own, because I was the fear that something bad's going to happen to your surviving loved ones, and I was just paranoid that something was going to happen and I was going to lose everybody. So I just didn't want to be on my own at all, and it took me 4 months, gradually building up, being able to go out with my dog on my own for more than 1 minute to 5 minutes, until I could go out for an hour or a bit longer. And then I went back to work about 6 months after, probably too soon, but I was just trying to get a sense of normality. And I spent an awful lot of time travelling, because we'd moved, so my trip there was several trains, and you know, I could be travelling for an hour and a half, 2 hours. And then I got a position which was a bit closer, but there was still another 30-45 minutes travel each way. And that travel time was really, really hard, because I was on my own, and your mind just wanders. And I was finding myself going into having panic attacks on a train with strangers needing to comfort me. Just getting really, really upset. And in the newest role that I was in at that time, I hadn't told anybody. I didn't want anyone judging me, thinking that I couldn't do the role that I was doing, and I did it brilliantly. They were, they couldn't understand how I was able to do what I was doing, but I compartmentalized it all. So the moment I got there, I just shut down. I forgot about. I focused at the task at hand, because it's so busy, that type of role, where you don't have time to think, sometimes to properly eat, or to have a drink properly, or go to the toilet when you really need to. It might be quite a few hours later by the time you get to go to it. But it was making me so ill every time I was doing that travel back and forth, where the reality hits and the grief, the panic attacks, and I just knew I needed to find something that I could do remotely. And I did. I found something which I absolutely loved. I was went back into still the blue light sector, but this time I was working in the fire sector. And I originally went in as a raid manager, and it was brilliant because there was nothing had been set up. So it was like a blank sheet for me to suggest strategies, processes, training, workshops, and then within I think it was just under 6 months, I then got promoted into heading up the PMO and the planning. And again, it was really good. There was some pieces of a PMO there, but it was a really, really low maturity. And I was just in my element. I absolutely love, hence the name, We Love PMO. I love anything to do with PMO, project risk management, and increased the maturity, introduced loads of new practices, did loads of coaching and training and workshops, and implementing because there wasn't a framework in place for the annual operational and business plans. So not only was I leading and putting processes and frameworks in place and providing assurance against delivery for the projects and programs, but also out further than a portfolio and covering the whole organisation in regards to the planning side of things. But as I was there for several years, but I just still had this little voice in my head, and before losing my son, I was starting to think a lot about actually, thinking about all these consultancies and consultants that I've worked with over the years, and thinking this would be amazing to be able to come into a business, work with so many different businesses, and really doing the areas that you're really, really passionate about, and actually helping turn around things, and taking chaos and putting it into order and into proper visions and plans and things. And I was having those thoughts again. I was just like, I've got all this experience that I've gathered over well over a decade, many years of providing support and of working with a number of different executives, and learning what actually works from a leadership perspective, how's best to present information at the varying levels, and making sure that things that are technical, how do you explain that in a friendly, non-jargon way so that everybody understands what it is and nobody's feeling silly for not understanding it. And at the start of this year, I was just like, I'm gonna do it, and I did. And I haven't looked back. I've absolutely loved it. It's been absolutely brilliant. I've worked with some amazing people, and not just here in the UK, but throughout many different countries in Europe, Australia, quite a few people across the United States, Canada, Dubai, Saudi Arabia. It's just really good, and I get to work with so many different people at different levels of their business, working with solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, founders, small business owners, large organisations, corporate organisations, and charities, and it's been brilliant. And just taking all that knowledge that I've gathered over the years in all the different roles that I've done and areas that I'm really passionate about, and bringing that knowledge, that corporate knowledge of how to, operationally manage, project manage, portfolio manage, and helping people put that into proportionately and tailoring it to people's specific businesses. So yeah, from service perspective, obviously I provide support in the PMO perspective. So, everything to do with like PMO setups, maturity assessments, project management as a service, PMO as a service, risk, providing risk management services, and also coaching. I coach a lot of people who want to get into the space of project management, and especially, with the sort of trauma that I've experienced and just my life journey itself, that really helps from a coaching perspective, because sometimes it's not the because you haven't worked in that field, there's an emotional block, or there's something else that's kind of holding people back from being able to move forward. So I've been really privileged actually to work with some really amazing people that I've coached and help them to get into the roles that they want to get into, actually, getting them to have that courage and that confidence in themselves, and selling themselves their qualities, even helping people who really needed the certifications for certain roles from a project management perspective, but they suffered severely from anxiety from the exams and just or had different sort of varying sort of needs as well, and actually helping them prepare so they could actually pass it, actually be confident and manage that anxiety, and then pass with flying colours and get the certifications that they wanted. It's just so rewarding. So there's that element, and then there's also the online business management, so working and providing that operational, being your right hand woman at the back end of your business. And then the bit that I geek out on, obviously, because I do love tech, is helping people, doing system audits and seeing what systems would work, and helping people get set up on that, setting it up from the start for them, or perhaps it's something they've been using for really, years, but they want to change things, and like helping people take that vision and tailoring that tool so they're not feeding the beast, but actually is working for them. So yeah, there's all sorts of things that I work on, and I really enjoy and love it, and look really forward to seeing where this goes. And working remotely for me has really helped me. So yeah, so like, if you are watching this and you've been thinking about, starting your own business, go for it, do it. There's only one you, and your experience will be truly unique compared to anybody else's. There'll be so many things that you have learned along your way that will help other people. So yeah, if you have any questions or anything, do feel free to sort of drop them in the comments. Subscribe if you want to follow along with me on my journey as I scale and grow my business more, but also just give you a bit more of that behind the scenes look at things. And of course, there's tutorials there as well. So yeah, thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you'll join me on the next one.